Next up is transforming content. So last week in lesson 4, we learned how to edit and combine shapes and paths. We made more complex artwork by editing them. That was a form of transforming, but in this lesson, we're going to learn even more. We're going to learn how to scale, rotate, and transform content in other ways using different tools and methods. So before we get going, I am going to close my artboard floating panel. I don't need that. So as we've seen in this lesson and previous lessons, there's a bounding box that appears around selected content. And we know that we can transform the content using that bounding box. So we've grabbed those corners and made it bigger or smaller or rotated it or whatever. We can also turn off that bounding box. And that makes it so that we can't resize the content by dragging anywhere on a bounding box. And that makes sense when there are certain things you want to do. So front artboard, that's this one. Let's make sure that that has artboard 1 showing. We are going to zoom out until we can see this graphic down here of windy conditions. So I'm just going to center that a little bit better. So we're targeting this graphic down here. With your selection tool, click on this graphic, and we're going to see that it's a bunch of different pieces, but it is grouped, and the bounding box went around the whole thing. If we were to move our pointer over the upper left corner and drag, we would resize the content. Okay, I'm going to undo that. That was not my goal. However, the bounding box makes it behave that way. So to temporarily hide this, we're going to come up to the View menu, and we're going to say Hide Bounding Box. Right there you are. Shift-Command-B. That took away the bounding box as we know it. We can still see some anchor points here, but no bounding box. We can't resize it. We can simply move it around now. So now if we move our cursor over to the upper left corner of the group again, we can take that and we can drag it onto the upper left corner of our artboard up here. And when we get there, we let go. Being zoomed out makes it a little bit difficult to get our placement perfect. We'll look at that in a minute. But now we can turn that bounding box back on. So View, and then show the bounding box. It's the same keyboard shortcut, so it's just a toggle. Shift-Command-B to show it and to hide it. Now we're back to having our bounding box. So that's pretty good. Looks like it's on our artboard. At times, however, you might want to position objects more precisely relative to either another object or to an artboard. So we could use alignment options as we did in Chapter 2, but we can also use smart guides and transform options in the Properties panel to get them to move to exact coordinates on the X and Y axes. This controls, or we could control positioning relative to the edge of the artboard. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add content to the background of an artboard and position it precisely. We want to see all 3 artboards, so Command-Shift-0, and we're going to click to select the far right artboard number 3, and there's a little black line around it. All right, we also need to be able to see that there is a blue shape below it, so I'm going to reposition a little bit here. This is our artboard that we have chosen. All right. So the transformation commands that we're about to apply are going to be applied specifically to this artboard. That's why we picked it first. We're going to now click to select this blue shape with the windmill logo down at the bottom. And then up in the Transform section of our Properties panel right here, we are going to click the upper left corner and lock that down as our reference anchor point. So not dead center, but top left corner. Then we're going to change the X and the Y values to 0. So you can come in here and say 0, 0, and look at that. It pulled it up to the 0 and 0 point of this artboard, which happens to be this top left corner, and that's where we had our anchor point showing up at. So that was more precise than the dragging that we just did with the previous artboard. We can click away to deselect, and we're going to move on to another tool now called scaling. So far in this book, we've scaled most of our content with selection tools, but we're going to use some new ones now. We're going to zoom out until we can see the person in the raincoat, which I can already see down here. So I'm going to click to select him or her, I don't know, and I'm going to zoom in. So once selected, I can again see that this is a group, says so right up here in my properties panel. And I can see some things are outlined, these are shapes, but notice that the arms are not a rounded rectangle, they're actually a path with a stroke on it. And that's going to come into play here in just a minute. All right, in our properties panel in Transform, back up here on the right, we're going to go back to the center reference point. We want it to resize from the center, not from one of those strange points. We also want to ensure that constrain width and height is selected. So we want the padlock or the chain link selected. That way changing one changes the other. And then in this width, instead of saying an exact number, we're going to scale this down 30%. So we're going to do 30 and the percent sign, and we're going to hit tab, and it did the exact same to the height, but it's showing us both in inches because that was our original measurement. So if we look at our person, I kind of get a kick out of this now. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Popeye, but he had really big arms, and so does this person. So the thing that happened here is our shapes scaled, but our strokes or effects didn't, so that if we had a, I don't know, 20 pixel stroke on this line, it stayed at 20 pixels, even though the rest of the body shrunk, and that's a problem. We don't want that. All right, if you want to see this without all this, all these edges kind of in your way, there's another view we can look at, and it is View, Hide Edges, Command H, kind of cleans up the view. We just see the bounding box. And again, our monster arms are outside the bounding box. All right, so by default, strokes and effects like drop shadows or these strokes that we have are not scaled with objects. So we need to tell it to do that before we made our 30% reduction. So go back and show your edges. And that should be the same Command H shortcut. We can see all of our edges again and undo the scaling. So Command Z, get it back up to that big size. So yes, this is a path with a very big stroke on it. All right, in our properties panel over here on the right, in the transform section, we want to go to the more, the 3 dots right here. And there's an option to scale strokes and effects. So if we tell this to go down to 30% in size, the strokes need to do the same thing. So we set that first. Then we come back in here and we change this again to be 30 and the percent sign, and we hit tab, and everything, including the strokes, scaled down correctly. All right. Now, hold down the space bar so that you can get the hand tool and just pull over so that to the left of it you can see this big flower over here. We are going to click to select this flower, and we're going to find a scaling tool another way rather than doing it up here in the transform box. There's an actual tool and it's nested in the rotate family. So if you come over here, the scale tool is the next option. So with the scale tool, we're going to choose that one. It's used to scale content by dragging. So like a lot of these tools, we can also double click on the tool in the toolbar to set up some things. This is also like in the past we've done object, transform, scale using menu items from up here. But we're going to double click on the scale tool in the toolbar, and that's going to pop up a window that allows us to do some scaling from here. We have a lot of options right at our disposal in this box. We want it to scale uniformly, not stretch it weird horizontally or vertically, so we're going to type in a 20 for 20%. Scale strokes and effects should be turned on, and then we also have this preview, which is really helpful. You see the results of what you're going to do before you actually tell it to do it. And that looks good, so we're going to say OK. So this method of scaling artwork may be useful if there's a lot of overlapping artwork, or when precision matters, or when you need more scale content. You need to scale things non-uniformly. With our selection tool, we have our flowers selected, and we need to be able to see the artboards. So I'm going to zoom out. There they are again. I'm going to use the hand tool and reposition a bit. With our selection tool, we're going to drag the flower up onto the artboard so that it's sitting on this horizontal line right here. And then we're going to fit that artboard into the window. So Command 0. If I click away, I see, yep, there's that flower, and I put it right here. I'm going to reselect that flower. If it's already selected, perfect. We're going to make some copies. Remember, it's really easy. We just hold Option and we pull away. And we're going to just make several and put them along this line in different places. So make some copies of this flower. And when you're happy with how many flowers you have grown, we can be done. I'm going to click away to deselect. I'm going to do a save as at this point, which is page 154. 154. And we'll move on to some new tools.